I keep saying tape. It's kind of an old-fashioned word, I guess. A little like where we're holding again. And first of all, as far as the page number, well, that's a good question. We're somewhere around, I'm guessing now, say approximately 438. I don't know. Where it starts with the words V'hanazir v'hamashiach. Maybe you'll tell me I can write it in my book. It's just before paragraph 16 for Tet Zayin. It's like one short, one or two paragraphs before that. If you find paragraph Tet Zayin, it's maybe a little before that where it says V'hanazir v'hamashiach. No. Maybe I'm saying it too. Maybe it's 356. I don't know, or 350. Maybe it's page 360. I don't know. You're finding it?
Yeah, page 439.
What? 4? Oh, yeah. Because the last thing I was 430. 439. Yeah. Okay, like I said, we're on page 439. Very good. Okay, it's okay. Yesterday I thought was Wednesday. 2 days ago I thought was Tuesday. I'm just lucky I know it was Wednesday. We have class today. Okay. So we're going to be on page 439. Again, the general idea of where we're holding is the discussion of the way that Nevi'im specifically connected to Hashem, to the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei name, the uniqueness of that name, the ability to recognize the name Elohim through logic, to come to the logical conclusion that there's a God, but there's no such thing as logic that comes up with the idea of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei name of that Shem Hashem of Ado and Nai. There is no logic to that. That comes through Nevuah. It comes through Ruach HaKodesh. It comes through then being passed down from one generation to the next. So we're going to pick it up now where it says on page 439, where it says V'hanazir v'hamashiach. So the idea that this extra spirit, this connection, this Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, whatever word you want to use, of this extra connection between Hashem and Navi was not just with those individuals. It turns out, V'hanazir, also someone who declared himself to be a Nazir, V'hamashiach keshenimshach lekehuna or limelucha, somebody who was anointed as a Kohen Gadol, or as a Kohen, and as a king, at the time when a Navi would in fact anoint him. Or when Hashem specifically went to help the individual to fix, to straighten out a problem that this individual was having in his life. When a Kohen, or not just a Kohen, but when someone would come to the Kohen to ask a question that required the involvement of the Urim V'Tumim, when he did that, there was a level of Ruach HaKodesh, of Ruach HaNevuah, and at that time also, it comes through the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. V'az yasuru milev adam hasvekot hakodmot asher haya mistapek be'Elokim. When a person reaches that level, whether it's Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, or anything else like that, all the earlier doubts he may have had about the relationship with Hashem will fall away. And he'll kind of make fun of the fact that he tried and others tried through various, trying to imagine and all ideas of how we understand the name of Hashem, that it would seem so silly in retrospect that he even thought, oh, I'm going to come to the idea of Yud Ke Vav Ke through X. When he realizes that when he actually has that connection, he realizes how foolish and foolhardy and strange it was his attempt before. I'm going to give you what I'm think about as a mashal in my head. Assume for a moment, anybody here ever been to Iceland? No? Okay, I've never been to. It's one of the few places on earth I wouldn't mind visiting one day. There aren't that many places I'm interested in going outside of Israel. That's one of them.
My parents have been there.
Well, your parents have been there, okay? I'm sure they told you it was beautiful and amazing and cold and whatever else it was.
Yeah, well, they took a cruise from Southampton through the fjords of Norway and from Norway to the north coast of Iceland and then back past the Isle of Skye in Scotland and back to Southampton.
Cool. So I've never been, but I can watch a movie. I can read a book. I can look on a map and I can imagine, oh, I must really know what it's like to be in Iceland and to really experience the day-to-day life. Give you a better example. And until I go there, I don't really know what it's like. And I say, oh, really? Give me a break. The other examples, which we can almost every one of us can relate to. Before you made Aliyah, you may have visited and learned about Israel, come on a pilot trip. But until you actually live here, it's a totally different story. Totally different when you're living here day to day. So in a sense, is what he's saying also, when a person reached that specific level, that they were able to look back at their past and say, oh, this is how I thought I was connected to God. I didn't know anything back then. ואז ישוב האדם עובד, חושק בנאבדו, ומוסר נפשו להרגע על אהבתו. Then a person gets to the point of being a servant of Hashem, one who desires to Hashem to serving him, and willing to give up his life for the love of Hashem. לגודל מה שהוא מוצא מערבות הדביקה בו, והנזק והצער בהתרחק ממנו. Due to the fact of the greatness of this amazing connection to Hashem, and the feeling of pain, literally pain and suffering, the farther away a person would get from Hashem. Now, let me finish the sentence. I have a few things on this. This is the opposite of philosophers. In other words, that we believe that a person, the closer he gets to Hashem, and he feels that connection, that when they're not close, they feel a sense of loss, a sense of pain. This is the opposite of what the philosophers said. He said the philosophers came to a conclusion. Remember that the name of Elohim, connecting to Hashem through that name, that there's God. The philosophers said, look, it's proper. We come to it in an ethical way. It's the truth. Because obviously God is above everything else. The philosophers say it's no different than saying, hey, look, you know what? Just like the sun is greater than anything else that we can really see, so too God is greater than anything. He says that if we were to deny the existence of God, according to philosophers, it's no worse than just saying, well, I don't agree that the specific gravity of iron is 7.2. I think it's 7.8. That's, by the way, a scientific issue. No, the philosophers are, you have God in your life, fine. You don't have God, fine. You believe in him, fine. You don't. But that's not how we are. We're the exact opposite. That the more we have of Hashem in our lives, the more we want Hashem in our lives, and the greater the desire to have Hashem and connect. So therefore, anyone who was connecting through the Yud Ke Vav Ke name, i.e. Nevi'im, and others who had that ability, the longer they would be without having Hashem, this connection, the more painful it would be to them. Okay, so at this point, the Rav has spent many pages trying to explain and to distinguish between the various ideas of the name of Hashem, between Elohim on the one hand and Yud Ke Vav Ke on the other. And now the Kuzari, the kings, we're finally going to hear from him. He says, I get it. Take a look at Tet Zion, please. Hold on. Just have to close this up here. Close there. Okay. Amar Kuzari. We're on Tet Zion now. So the Kuzari said, Kvarit ba'erli ha'efresh ben Elokim v'Hashem. I understand now the difference between the name Elokim and the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. V'avinoti ma ben Elokei Avraham ve'Elohei Aristo. And I also understand the difference between the perspective of God from Avraham Avinu and that of Aristotle. V'shashem tichsofna lo hanfashot b'tam uriyah. That this Hashem is that which the nefashot of Am Yisrael so strongly desire to see in God. Ve'elokim yatei hakasha, and that the name of God, of Elokim, and the concept of a creator is arrived at through logic. He accepts that. V'atamahu yavi mishi yagia elav shimson nafsho al ahavato v'shiamut aleha. He makes a very strong point that the Chaver, the Rav, only hinted to, that now he makes stronger, which is that the love of Hashem is such that a person is willing to give up his life for God. A philosopher, for example, who had the perspective we talked about a couple minutes ago, that you have God, fine, you don't have God, fine. No way in the world would such an individual be willing to give up his life for God. I'm going to read another couple lines, the rest of this little paragraph, and we're going to go back to that topic of giving up your life for Hashem. וההקשה הזאת היא רואה כי רוממותו חובה, בעוד שלא תזיק ולא יגיע בעבור צער. ואין להאשים אריסטו כשהוא לועג על מעשה הנימוסים. He says you can't fault Aristotle for his perspective on God. אחר שהוא מסופק אם ידע אלוקים אותם. Now, it's the relationship that Aristotle would have had with God, and he's considered the father of philosophy, that you can't fault him or the philosophers for their perspective. The Jewish people have just a different relationship with Hashem. And if the philosophers arrived at the concept of Hashem, of God, through logic, then it can be argued. It can be changed. It can be put to the side with no ramifications. Okay. So I want to spend a couple minutes on the topic. We may get to, there's three I want to talk about today, which one of them is in this paragraph and the next two are the next paragraph. I don't know if I'll get to all three today. We'll see. The question is, what would a person be willing to this is, sorry for the dangling participle, but what would a person be willing to give up their life for? Okay. Most, I would hope, most people first would say that if it was a choice between them, God forbid, getting shot or their child, no matter the age, they would take the bullet for the child. I would hope most would say that. So you'd be willing to die for your child, perhaps maybe somebody else you may love. It is interesting that in World War II, and it's documented, that many people who died al Kiddush Hashem, who went and lost their lives, and maybe even went to the gas chamber saying Shema Yisrael, we're not people who a week ago were sitting learning a Blat Gemara and saying Shema and davening Hanetz, let's just say. People, we have within us, when I say people, I'm talking about the Jewish people, we have within us this Nefesh Elokit, this godly soul that yearns to be with Hashem, that wants to do the work of Hashem, that wants to do the Avodah of Hashem here in this world. So strong that even we sometimes don't realize that we're willing to give up our life. We have halachot. We know that if a person is told, for example, eat this ham sandwich or I'll kill you, you let yourself, you eat this ham sandwich, you make a bracha and you bench and everything else. But if you're told to worship Avodah Zarah, you're told to commit adultery, you're told to kill somebody, or you're going to be killed, we know you have to give up your life. And that's a mitzvah, that's a Kiddush Hashem as well. Unless it's something being done publicly. If a person lives in a time period where they publicly taken a Jewish individual outside and say, here, eat this ham sandwich or I'll kill you, you let yourself be killed. That's all Kiddush Hashem as well. It's not being done privately, it's being done publicly, it's a different story. So we know that innately that we are hopefully willing to give up our lives for our children, for our loved ones. We're willing to give up our life for Hashem. However, there are certain things that we do metaphorically without even realizing it. I'm not necessarily talking to the people in front of me right now, but I'm talking in general terms, where we give up our lives unnecessarily. I'm going to explain to you what I'm talking about. We know that when Avraham Avinu and Sarah started first to spread the word of Hashem throughout the world, it says that Avraham was megayer the men, and Avraham converted the men and to Judaism, taught them about Hashem, and that Sarah converted the women and brought them closer to Hashem. I want to share with you something the Rambam tells us. And if I forget to, this is what I want to do. Whoops, where is it? Here. If I forget to take it off the screen share, someone remind me, please, when I'm done with screen sharing. Okay, let's make this a little smaller, move you all over here. Okay, this is the Rambam in Hilchot Avodah Zarah, Avodat Kochavim. He says as follows, tells us a little bit about what Avraham did. Where you see the bracket, it's crudely underlined because it's something I underlined once before a long time ago. It's talking about Avraham Avinu. Vayam halech v'korei u'mekabetz ha'am me'ir le'ir. Avraham Avinu would wander from one city to another and call out the name of God, u'mimamlacha le'mamlacha, from one kingdom to another. Ad she'yigia le'eretz Canaan. Remember, he started off in Ur Kasdim, and he goes from one place to another, and from one area to another. And on his way, he is spreading the word of Hashem and the idea of God. Ad she'yigia le'eretz Canaan, v'hu koreh. And from there, again, he called on the name of God. Shne'emar, for it says, vayikra b'shem Hashem el olam. Very nice. V'kevan shayu ha'am mitkabsim elav, and when the people would gather to him, v'shoalin lo al divarav, and ask him, like, what is this God thing? Can you tell me about this Judaism thing? Hayamodia l'chol echad ve'echad, he would let each one know, kefi da'ato, at their level. This is the concept, of course, of chanoch lenar al pi darko, to teach someone based on their level. Ad shiachazireu l'derech ha'emet, until he would say that they would return them to the path of truth, meaning to know Hashem. Ad shenikbetzu elav alpayim urivavot. He would convert. When you learn the idea, at least as a child in school, or whenever you learned it first, that Avraham converted people to Judaism and Sarah, women to Judaism. You picture a few hundred, a couple hundred. The Rambam tells us he converted thousands and tens of thousands of people to Judaism. V'hem anshe Beit Avraham. They are the ones who are known as the house of Avraham. V'shatal b'libam ha'ikar ha'gadol hazeh, and he planted in their heart this great fundamental principle. V'chiber bo sfarim, and he wrote books. V'odiu liYitzchak beno, and he let his son Yitzchak as well know about Hashem. Okay, that's the Rambam tells us. What does this have to do with giving up your life? If you look in the Torah, and you get to just a couple of weeks from now, you get to Vayera and Chaye Sarah, Toldot. We learn about Avraham. We learn about the Akedat Yitzchak. We then learn about Yitzchak with Esav. We learn about Yaakov, the story of Yaakov and his sons and everything else. We know that Sefer Bereshit is the beginning of the world and the beginning of Am Yisrael. And we hear and read a lot about Avraham and Yitzchak. Yitzchak is not mentioned as much as the other two Avot, but he's mentioned. Yet here we see in the Rambam that Avraham Avinu converted tens of thousands of people. We never hear a single word about them in the Torah, not one. Who do we hear about? Yitzchak. We only hear about his flesh and blood son. Question is why? What happened? Why doesn't the Torah mention? And we only know about the idea of him converting all these other people. Let me take it off screen share now for a moment. All these other people, because the Midrash tells us that Rashi quotes. What about these tens of thousands of people? Why does the Torah not talk about them? Avram understood his priorities. He understood his priorities that even though he was involved in community work, even though he was involved in thousands and thousands of people's lives, the only one that was the most important to him, the one that had to be, was his own flesh and blood, Yitzchak. Very sadly, and I'm sure you all know people like this, there are people who have professions, it could be the helping profession, the healing profession, in clerical, or whether it's it could be rabbis, or could be administrators of school, whatever it might be, whatever these professional positions are, where people are involved in other people's lives, and in some cases in many, many, many people's lives, they're willing to sacrifice their own children for the ones who are outside their house. I cannot tell you how many people I know here and back in Chutz La'aretz who fall into this category. Many, many, many people who are so involved. Take a rabbi as an example of a shul. So involved with the congregation, so involved with the meetings, and so involved with the tzedakahs and the visiting the sick and the gemachim and everything else, and preparing shiurim and all, that their own children suffer as a result. It's very sad. They're willing to give up, and they're giving up the life of their child in place of the life of the people that they're trying to help. That's part of the message of this Rambam. Rambam is particularly telling us, why does Rambam have to tell us how many people? Who cares how many people? It says that they convert the men and she converted the women. Big deal. Because it's telling a message that he immediately mentions after these tens of thousands of people that are converted, that the most important one was Yitzchak. So when I was saying about giving up your life, and some people unfortunately give up their life in quotes for other people and leave their family behind. Critical problem that has to be addressed by, unfortunately, a large amount of people. So now we finished this little short paragraph of the Kuzari. Interestingly enough, the way Rav Yehuda Halevi wrote this book, he obviously gives the Rav a lot more words than he gives the king, but sometimes it's many weeks we have the Rav, and then we hear a little blip of the king. But we just heard a little blip. He said, look, I accept what you're saying. I see that I get the difference between the name of Elohim, the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. I understand the implications. I understand why the philosophers came to one conclusion. You can't fault them for that, etc. So let's take a look at the next paragraph in the book, in Yud Zayin, number 17. What we're going to do is I'm going to read just a couple lines, and we're going to take a look at another midrash. Not another, we're going to look at a midrash. Amar Chaver, uve'emet, in truth, Saval Avraham Ur-Kastim, V'hagerut, V'hamila, V'harchakat Yishmael, V'akedat Yitzchak Lishchot Oto. Avraham went through so much in his life. We know that he had 10 nisyonot, 10 tests. Among them, his being in the fire in Ur-Kastim, the actual conversion, meaning giving himself a brit milah, the distancing from Yishmael. I'm going to come back to that. Yakedat Yitzchak itself. Why did he do all that? Is it because he kind of figured out, as we say, Makiret Boro from a young age? He recognized the creator from a young age? No. He was able to connect to Hashem. And why did Hashem choose him? You have to ask Hashem. Through not just logic that, well, there must be what's known in the Midrash as the Baal Habirah. There has to be the owner of the house, meaning in this case, God. But he also came to it through a level of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, through the connection of Ruach HaKodesh. And this is why he did all these other things. Imagine you come to a logical conclusion that there's God, and then you start hearing voices that tell you to do certain things. Most people nowadays would find the DSM number that you belong to and put you away in the mental institution. Back then, you were a Navi, which Avraham Avinu was, of course. I'm going to read another sentence and come back to this Yishmael thing. He also saw that Avraham, that nothing he did escaped God's notice. And he also saw Gomeloto, he rewarded him al tzidkato l'regaim, for everything, every little thing he did, Hashem rewarded him. And God guided him along the right path in all his actions. To the point where Avram wouldn't move back or forward without Hashem's permission. And how could he not kind of laugh at his earlier assumptions and the way he came to a logical conclusion there was God, now that he has this different level of connection? As our rabbis have told us, Hashem takes him outside to count the stars. The Chachamim say, leave your sorcery, your divinity behind, meaning, leave behind all of your logic, your knowledge, your wisdom, Okay, now I'm gonna come back to the explanation of this last sentence. There's two topics I want to talk about. If I don't run out of time, we'll start with the first one. The first one has to do with Harchakat Yishmael. You'll notice he gives the Rav gives in his list of nisyonot one that you may not have thought about. You know, we know that Lech Lecha Me'artzecha coming up next Shabbat is one of the big tests of Avraham Avinu, leaving his home, his birthplace, going through the Kivshana Esh, giving himself a Brit Milah, living to be an old man before he had his first child, which Hashem said, Ki Yitzchaki Karei Lechazara, all these tests. But this statement, Harchakat Yishmael, having to distance himself from Yishmael, it doesn't say, and I know this isn't Rashi, but this isn't the word, a pasuk in the Torah, but let's look at it from a different perspective. What are the words Rabbi Yehuda Levi uses? Now remember, Rabbi Yehuda Levi was a man of words. That was his life. He said that distancing Yishmael, l'archik, to push something off. Why didn't he just say Yishmael? Or just say the fact that he had to throw Yishmael out of the house at his wife Sarah's request? So let's take a look at the Midrash. Kind of a surprising one, actually. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay. I want you to imagine a conversation. Imagine a conversation that took place between Avraham and Sarah. Remember that Avraham had a son with Hagar. His name was Yishmael. It was his son. And now Sarah says, Gareshet Amazot, throw this woman out, and this boy, throw him out. I don't want to have anything to do with him. I don't want having any influence on my son whatsoever, on our son Yitzchak. And it's Vayera Beinav. It was evil in his eyes. Avraham really felt this was a terrible thing. This is my son you're trying to throw out. And Hashem comes to Avraham and says, Kol asher tomar Sarah ishtecha, whatever your wife Sarah says, Shema bekolah, listen to her. From here, the rabbis say she had a higher level of nevuah, of prophecy, than Avraham Avinu himself had. Now, does that mean when he does send them out of the house that he's done? Okay, have a nice life, bye. This is his son. This is flesh and blood. So imagine that there is a conversation between Avraham and Sarah, whereby Avraham says, look, I want to see him. You can't, I know you don't want him back in the house. I want to see my son. And they have a discussion. And in that discussion, he is able to convince Sarah to let him go and see her, go and see him. Let's take a look at a midrash, where it says at the top of the page here, it says, Shalach Yishmael, v'lakach lo isha mibenot Moav. He sent Ishmael away, and this is Avraham, sent Ishmael, and he took a wife from Benot Moav, a Moabite woman. Va'ashaya hayashema, and her name was Ashaya. Lachar gimel shanim, after 3 years of being separated from him, halach Avraham lirot et Yishmael. He went to see Ishmael. V'nishba l'Sarah, and he made a promise to Sarah. She'ino yored min hagamal b'makom she'Yishmael sharui. He promised her. She said like this: "You want to go? Go. One condition," and he accepted it. I won't get off my donkey. Why do you think that is? What's that? Why can't he get off his donkey? What would you think? Take a wild guess. No? Okay. Want me to let you know? Fine. I've been on a camel a couple times. I've been on, I think, one donkey. Imagine for a moment, you haven't seen your child for 3 years. What is the first thing you want to do? You want to throw your arms around him, hug him. Doing that on a donkey or on a camel is almost impossible, at least not in the very warm embrace that you want to do. Sarah made him promise not to get off the camel or the donkey because she knew that there would be a warm embrace and she didn't want that. Amazing. Let's continue the Midrash. He got to where Ishmael was living in the middle of the day. And he found this Moabite wife of Ishmael. Amarla, he said to her, Hechanu Ishmael, where's Ishmael? Amrala, she said to him, Halakhu v'imo lavi perot utmare min hamidbar. He and his mother, Hagar, went out to the desert to go collect some fruits and some dates. It's interesting why we say that separate, because dates are fruit. Amarle, so he said to her, Avram said to his Keilu daughter-in-law, Tnili me'at lechem u'me'at mayim, ki ayefa nafshi miderech hamidbar. Please give me a little bit of bread and water, because I'm tired from my travel. Amrale, so she said to him, Ein li lo lechem v'lo mayim, I don't have anything. Why is she saying this? This is the Moabite woman, right? The Moavi did not give mayim and lechem to the Jews who wanted to cross by their land, so nothing has changed. Amarle, so Avram said to her, Kishiyavo Yishmael, when Yishmael comes home, Tagid et hadvarim ha'ela, please give him a message for me. Ve'imri lo, and say to him, Chalaf et miftan beitecha she'ena tova lach. Someone crossed the threshold of your home who's not good for you. Ve'lo re'uya lach, and is not appropriate for you. Uchsheba Yishmael, when Yishmael came home, higida lo et hadvarim. She gave him the message. Uben chacham kechatzi chacham, and the son of a chacham is like a half a chacham, meaning Yishmael had brains. He got brains from his father. Ve'evin Yishmael, and Yishmael understood that his father had been there and that he disapproved of the woman he married. V'shalcha, he sent her away. Shalcha, so he sent away his wife. Shalch, meaning he divorced her. Shalcha imo v'lakcha lo isha mibeit aviha. He then sent his mother to find another wife for him from the family of his father. Fatima Shema, her name was Fatima. V'od la'achar gimel shanim, and 3 years later, so now it's 6 years since he's actually seen his son. Halach Avram le'rot et Yishmael. Avram went to see Ishmael. V'nishba l'sara she'eno yored min hagamal. After 6 years, he's still promising his wife he's not going to get off the gamal, off the camel. Before it was a gamal also, so I said donkey, but he didn't get off the gamal, so now he's really high up. He's not going to be able to give his son a hug. The makom sheishmael shavu isham v'giya lechsham v'chatzi hayom. This story repeats itself. Umatzai ishto sheishmael, and he found his wife of Yishmael v'chulei. Means the same story happened and continued. Ad miyad shehotzia v'natna lo. Immediately, when she was asked to give him bread and water, she did. Amad Abraham hayami palel ifnei hakadosh baruch hu. Abraham stopped. He got up. He stood before God and prayed. Al beno, for his son. And suddenly the house of Ishmael became filled with all goodness, money, and blessing. When Ishmael came, so Avram wasn't even there anymore. He left. Again, he didn't see his son. And Ishmael was told about what happened. Until now, he understood that whatever he had was only because pure chesed from Hashem. So meaning that everything he had was only from Hashem. He understood that. And now that the bracha comes that his father gave him, it's even more so. What is this point of the Midrash here? It's a nice story. It's amazing, actually. What's its point? When you read the Torah, and you look in the Pirkei Avot, and you see the 10 nisyonot that Abraham had to go through, the 10 tests. I don't remember if that's even listed as one of them. Honestly, I'd have to look. I haven't looked. But assuming it is or isn't, doesn't make a difference at the moment. How hard did that have to be for Abraham Avinu to send his child away? I've mentioned before, this concept of the rockabye baby syndrome. well, I mentioned this years ago when we talked about the Akedat Yitzchak. It's not my terminology. You listen to the words of a child's nursery rhyme, rockabye baby on the treetop, when the wind blows, the cradle will rock, etc. And down will come baby, cradle no. We're singing to a baby about a baby falling out of a tree. That's such a beautiful thing. And we don't even think about it. We come to Akedat Yitzchak, which we'll come to in a couple more weeks, and we'll see, okay, we know he lives, so we don't get all worked up. Imagine hearing that story, though, for the very first time. The father's going to take his child, going to sacrifice him, going to kill him just because God told him to do that. We don't get, we should be like in shivers when we hear the story. When we come to the same thing, when Ishmael is thrown out and Sarah tells her husband, and also send this boy, get rid of him. And we see the story of Ishmael. We just read it on Rosh Hashanah. We're going to read it again soon. The same thing is happening. I know what that is. Wait. The same thing is happening. And that is, we should be thinking like, Vezmir, he takes this young man whom he has raised, and now he has to take him and throw him out of the house. Can you imagine the pain that he had to go through, the suffering he had to go through? But he did it. Why? Why does he leave his home? Why does he give himself a brit milah? Why, and why? All these questions. The answer is exactly what the Rav is trying to tell us here. It's not because of a God that he understood through logic, but because of a Hashem he came to know through the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, through the Ruach HaKodesh. And therefore, in spite of the fact that it may have been difficult, he did it because he understood he was supposed to do this, what Hashem wanted him to do. I'm going to mention one other thing, and that is as follows. It says, he quotes a pasuk when he talks about Abraham Avinu changing his perspective from being one of recognizing Hashem through logic to one of recognizing Hashem through connection, and the Yud Kei Vav Kei. He refers to the story of, and I don't like story, to the narrative of when Hashem tells him, "Tzei achutza," or he said, "Go outside." He takes him out. Hashem takes him outside, and he says, "Look at the stars, and count them." And he says, "Ko yezarecha," so shall your children be. I've heard this quoted a couple times. I have never found the actual midrash that this is about to tell you. I've looked for it. If you know where it is, please tell me. I have no idea. What does it mean, Ko yezarecha? So the basic understanding of that pasuk is, so shall children be. Look up at the stars, and just like you can't count the stars, you're not going to be able to count how many children you have. That's the basic understanding. But the midrash tells us, Hashem says, "Sforotam im tuchal," count them if you can, wasn't a rhetorical statement. Avraham Avinu started to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. And Hashem says, look, you're trying the absolute impossible. There's no way you can count all of them. But that doesn't stop you from starting the task. Ko yezarecha, so shall your children be. They know they can't finish the task sometimes. And it's way bigger than they can be. But it doesn't say they're not going to do it, because it's an innate thing that we all have from Avraham Avinu and our Jewish DNA as to why we may sometimes start a project, start a whatever it might be, knowing full well we will never see the end of it. It's something that may take many, many years after we're not here in this world, but we still get something started because of Avraham, Ko yezarecha. So we're seeing now from the Rav two things besides the others I didn't mention. On the one hand, we have the idea of that Avraham went through things that were painful, but he still went through them and did them because of Shem Hashem, that he connected through the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. On the other hand, what he gave was the horish to us. What he what do you say? How do you say the horish? He bequeathed to us in our Jewish DNA, and that is the perseverance, and that is the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that we too can connect to Hashem, although we don't have the Ruach HaKodesh, and we don't have the ability for today for Nuvuah, but because we have the connection through our father Avraham Avinu to Hashem, that's where we get this feeling in our Jewish DNA of how we relate to Hashem. Bezrat Hashem next week, we'll pick it up here. I'm going to explain a couple more points that he makes that I didn't translate before we move on. That's it. I wish you all a wonderful day and a good week, and stay healthy.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Be well. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Have a wonderful day. Okay. Thank you. 1 second.